Welcome back, obviously, to another EMC Monday Mastermind hosted by Every Move Collective. Thank you for being here. We're going to be learning today about building your business with unreasonable hospitality with DJ Ten Hoeve, who is a top 100 agent from Monmouth County, New Jersey, just not far from us here in Westchester, New York. Before I go on to introduce him properly, just a little reminder about who we are. Myself, my mom, Eva, Dylan, many of you who were at the event this past week met us. We run a top producing team out of Westchester County, New York, and Connecticut. We also run this amazing organization of Every Move Collective with EXP that brings you these bi monthly masterminds where we come together to learn from other leaders in our industry. So, thank you all for being here. We hope you're having a great Monday despite the rain. We encourage you. We talked with DJ briefly before this call. We really would love for this call to be as conversational as possible. So if everyone right now actually could chime in the chat and say what your market is, what company you're with, and just a little hello, that would be great. And then we can just keep the chat going and raise your hand if you have questions. Please turn on your cameras if you're able to, just so we can really feel like we're in a room together. Also, you're bound to be more focused if you're able
Dylan is
to
there,
be on
though.
screen. Oh, hey, Dylan. Okay, so without further ado, DJ, I would love to introduce you and hand the mic over. So DJ is a top KW team based in Monmouth County, like I said. He works with 200 families annually, has done over $1 billion in lifetime sold volume. And really what drew us to DJ was how he built his business, which was by crafting a client experience that continues to generate leads without having to go out and buy leads. There's so many ways to generate leads, and this is a really unique way. And we're really excited to hear how he does this and incorporates this into his business. And if you do this in your business, feel free to chime in and share how you do so.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me okay and see me okay?
Perfect.
Good?
Excellent.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. This is a great pleasure of mine. I love teaching and I love giving back. I've been in the business for 18 years. My thing I hate the most when I get on masterminds like this or speeches is when the person talks about themselves for an hour. So I promise I won't do that. My goal in doing this is that each and every one of you will leave here with one thing that you can walk away and actually implement in your business that'll help you do more business before the end of the year than what you would have had in place before it. There's always a lot of things we leave these meetings and want to implement, but sometimes you leave with too much. So I'm hoping there's one thing you can walk away with today that you can actually put into practice and will lead you to more business. I've been doing this for 18 years. Like I said, I started in 2008. So I was working two careers, and I've built a team now that's 15 people here in central New Jersey. We do cover northern New Jersey as well. And we're very fortunate. Like Colby had mentioned, we serve about 200 families a year, mostly in the luxury price point, but we do help everybody from $100,000 up. But a lot of our business is in the multi-million dollar price range, and my specialty is really the uber high-end stuff that's anywhere between 5 million and 40 million. And that's really where unreasonable hospitality allows you to take a customer who has a certain level of expectation and really wow them. And then when you apply that to the person who's not expecting that because they're a $700,000 or $500,000 buyer or seller, it really, really impresses them. And then you earn their business and their referrals. Because we all know the person might be a $300,000 townhouse buyer, but that doesn't mean they're not friends with somebody who's got a $20 million property that they want to buy or sell. And with the way that properties are appreciating over the course of time, that $300,000 buyer or seller turns into your multi-million dollar buyer within, a decade. So we've built this business really trying to treat every single customer as if they're the luxury customer and applying that customer service to everybody so that they feel like they want to come back because you're treating them. They might have the budget for a Holiday Inn, but they feel like they're staying at a Ritz-Carlton. So I'm going to start with a story for you guys. And like Colby mentioned, I really would love this to be more question and answer and more conversational because otherwise you're going to sit here and listen to me talk for an hour. And I don't want to lose you. I don't want you guys talking on your cell phones or trying to put a deal together. I would love for you to make this more of a mastermind and a question and answer session. So please don't be bashful to be the first person who asks. Colby and Ava, if you guys don't mind watching the chat so you can let me know if anything comes in, that would be helpful. So if you have read or haven't read the book Unreasonable Hospitality, it's written about a restaurant that went from number 50 on the top restaurants in the world to number one within 5 short years. If you're a restaurant that's on the Michelin star checklist or that's a destination location for people to go to, one of the biggest compliments you can have is that when a customer comes in, they walk in with their luggage, which probably sounds a little weird. But the reason why that's important and why it's a compliment is that it means that you're either the first thing they did when they showed up to that city or the last thing they're doing before they leave. And either way, it's a huge compliment because you are the most important thing for them to do while they are there. If you read the book, there's a story about four European travelers that come to the restaurant 11 Madison Park in New York City. And while they're there, their server, who's been trained to listen and have a great conversation to learn more about them, picks up on the fact that this group of four people is there because they're traveling from Europe to do a culinary journey. And their goal was to hit every single major destination to eat in New York City. So the server's going back and forth and talking to them. And they're like, well, we've been to Per Se and we've been to Jean Georges and we've been to Danielle and now we're at EMP. But as they're joking around about it, they mentioned that the one thing they didn't get to do in New York City was to eat one of those New York City iconic hot dogs. And the conversation kind of jokes around, and that's the end of it. And the server disappears to go take care of their food. Well, immediately, she takes that information back to someone in the restaurant whose title is Dreamweaver. And their job is to craft these unique, unreasonable hospitality moments for the guests at the restaurant. She takes back that piece of information. The Dreamweaver leaves, goes around the corner, and picks up a New York City dirty water hot dog, picks up four of them, brings them back into the Michelin star kitchen and gives this three-star Michelin chef four dirty water dogs to plate up on their beautiful porcelain and do it with flourishes of mustard and ketchup. And they bring it out to the table. And the reaction they get from these four people is just speechless, right? Because they feel seen and they feel heard. Of all the amazing experiences that they paid for in New York City, some of the best meals you can possibly have anywhere in the world, their favorite memory from that trip ended up being a $2 hot dog that they got in New York City. And that's something that we have the opportunity to do every day, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be expensive. It's about being more thoughtful. And I think that's where a lot of people lose the idea, especially those of us in real estate. We think about closing gifts, right? Okay, the person spent more money with me. I should buy them a more expensive closing gift. Luxury is luxury is about money. Hospitality is about thoughtfulness. People prefer you being thoughtful over spending more money on them. And that's what we have to do as real estate agents and as service professionals is how do we listen more? How do we make that person feel seen, heard, so that we can actually deliver a better experience that makes them not even contemplate going someplace else? The statistics come out every year from NAR, and they show that 98% of people will say that they'll do business with the same real estate agent that they bought the house with, but about 30% of people do. Why? Because we don't stay in touch. We don't provide a memorable enough experience. We don't provide enough value for that person to not have to look elsewhere. And when you stay out of communication with that person for a couple of years, other real estate agents enter their life in different ways and they usurp you and they take over and they become the person that's easier to do business with. Our job is to make it unreasonable for them to go anywhere else other than call you to do business. So that's what my goal is today, is to explain to you what we've done in our business and sort of the things we're thinking about doing more so that you guys can implement things like this into your business as well. In the book, they talk about an easy way to distinguish what unreasonable hospitality is. And they say service is black and white, hospitality is color. And there's a lot of truth to that statement, which means you could be the most technically sound real estate agent ever, right? You could guide the client perfectly from the time they sit down with you to sign the buyer broker agreement all the way to a closing without a single hiccup, which is extremely unlikely to happen given our business. But even if you did that, that's just the expectation, right? The expectation is you do a good job and that the person doesn't have any hiccups. Rarely happens, but it'd be great if you did. But just doing that isn't going to make that person remember you. Why is it, and this is a point of frustration for me, that you have real estate agents that are not technically sound and in my opinion might actually be a hot mess, but they have a slew of raving fans who refer them business that's unbelievable. And they're on social media talking about all the wonderful things about this person. Well, that person might not be technically sound, but they're probably paying really close attention to listening and to hearing and seeing their customer and to make sure that that person feels that way. And that's something we all have to do better with. And if you own a team, you run a business, you may not be adept at doing this yourself, but you have the capacity to leverage that part of your business out to somebody who maybe that's their 80%. Maybe that's their love language and that's what they love doing. And finding the person who really wants to live in that space and is good at it is just as valuable as you being good at it in the first place. If you think that what I'm talking about is wrong, I urge you to change the way you think and to look at the world around you right now because we're in the thank you economy or the hospitality economy. Thank you economy is what Gary Vaynerchuk calls it, Gary V. We all know that information is readily available around us, right? So with the advent of ChatGPT, a customer could basically go on Zillow, find the property that they want, and go ask ChatGPT every single step along the way of how to have a successful real estate transaction and do it completely by themselves. The information and the steps to doing this transaction is not where the value is anymore. It is in creating something that's easier for the person to do and or more memorable for them to do with you than to do it on their own. We know that running a real estate transaction for yourself takes a minimum of 72 hours just to get the transaction to close, and that's without any other hiccups that happen during the way. Most people don't have that amount of time to spend aside from their primary career or their family or whatever they're doing. That's where we fill that void. But ChatGPT and automation and AI is making that even shorter and faster for people to do. But what they can't necessarily do is create the memories and the feelings that we can from being as experienced in doing this. So I've taught this a few times. We ran a mastermind on this last week, and I get from people that this sounds really expensive as you start to talk about some of these ideas. It sounds expensive, and I don't know that I can afford to do this. And what I would challenge you with is I don't think you can afford not to do this. If you're not doing this, someone else is, and I know that I'm doing it. So who's the person in your local market that's going to adopt this strategy, or maybe already has, that's going to eventually eat your lunch if you're not paying attention to how to deliver better experiences for your customer? Because it's not the information anymore that's valuable, it's the experience that you're providing. So, um, feel free to raise your hand, ask any questions as you have. But I want to give you guys some examples from the book that they talk about that may be valuable to you as you're thinking about what are some things that you guys can do in your business. Um,
We do have
there's
one
another book.
question.
What's that?
We do have a question in the chat.
Sure, go for it.
Vince is asking, how would you say you ultimately broke into the luxury market? Uh, Maybe that's coming in the future, but if you want to address that now.
I'll address that one probably later, Vince. Thanks for the question. It has a lot to do with where my background was. So I used to work in medical sales prior to this, and I had basically two careers at the same time, but that'll probably come up more at the end of the talk. If I don't hit that, please make sure to bring me back to it. There's a second book that I want to make sure you guys also write down. It's called The Power of Moments. It's by two brothers named Chip Heath and Dan Heath. It is really, really similar to the way that Unreasonable Hospitality is written. And I'll give you an example here. So, um, back up one more step. Last week, we ran an in-person mastermind about this. And as I got to this point of the conversation, I asked a couple people in the room if they, when they sat down at their table, if they had anything unique that was in front of them. And one of the people that was there had a coffee that was exactly from their favorite local coffee place, and it was their exact drink that they loved. Another person had post-it notes that were a purple post-it note with purple pen because purple was their favorite color. Another person in the room, we had a blanket sitting at their chair waiting for them because they had told us that they run cold when they're at meetings and they tend to be really chilly. Another person had a container of chocolate covered pretzels in there because that was their favorite snack. So what we did was we used the registration process for that mastermind as a way to ask a bunch of questions that people just thought we were trying to learn more about them. And then we took that information and we delivered unreasonable hospitality for them to experience at the beginning of that mastermind, experiencing themselves, what they were going to then learn how to do for other people. So some examples from the Power of Moments book is imagine if you guys went to check in at a hotel. And when you checked in, it was just the normal process, right? You check in, they give you your keys, you go to your room. But in your room waiting for you is a coffee freshly brewed from your local roastery, wherever you came from, not from the local city. But like if you were coming from New York to California and you're in LA, and if you're down here, one of our favorite places is Rook Coffee. What if there was a freshly brewed Rook Coffee waiting for you in your room with the Asbury Park Press newspaper there? Because that's your favorite newspaper you read. You'd be blown away. Like, how did that hotel even do that? Why would they spend $30 to have all that stuff shipped out here for me? But it makes such a memorable experience for people that it becomes something you then put on TripAdvisor about your review of the place that you stayed. You post social media about it. You tell your friends about it. And it's a way for that unique hotel to differentiate itself from all the others that are in the area. Another example from the book is there's this very motel looking hotel out in Los Angeles next to Disneyland called Magic Castle. And it's what you'd think of from like an 80s motel. It's got shag carpet. When you go and check in, the lobby and the foyer is like going to like a rental car agency. Like it's not a fancy place whatsoever, but it has more five-star reviews than all of the Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons hotels surrounding it. And the reason for it is a bunch of things that they do that just make it memorable. When you're out by the pool, there's this beautiful phone that's sitting on the side of the building that stands out. And when you pick it up, it says, Popsicle Hotline, how can we help you? And what you do is you pick up that phone, you tell them where you're sitting around the pool, and then somebody walks out to your pool chase lounge dressed in all white with white gloves with a silver platter and a popsicle just for you. It's crazy, right? Like it's not an expensive thing for them to do, but they figured out how to systemize a magical moment for people. Those same people go back to their room, and if it's a rainy day and you've got kids and now you're stuck in this place, you can't do anything. They have 24/7 free snacks and drinks. If you call the front desk, they'll deliver whatever you want. They'll also deliver DVDs and board games for you to play as a family. And if you have your laundry done with them while you're staying at the hotel, they deliver it in Christmas gift wrapping as if it was a present back to your room. It's not about expensive stuff. It's about just flipping the script with people, right? Doing something that's unexpected. Another example of this that they talk about in the book is um, there's a high school that most of us have seen kids or have relatives of ours who are committing to a college, right? And if you're an athlete in high school and you're going to play in college, there's this thing called signing day, where they make a big deal about it. You have the step and repeat behind you. You've got all the swag on from that local college, and they make a big deal about where you're going to play college sports. Well, the high school felt kind of bad that all the rest of the kids who were going to college that weren't going to play a sport in college felt like they were left out. So they turned it into signing day for everybody. And they made a stage in the auditorium where everybody got to come up on stage. They would do it all with video. All the parents were invited. And you had a venue now for every kid in the class to be able to experience what signing day was like for the athletes, even if you weren't going to play college sports. So there's a lot of different things as you read these books that will become applicable as to things you could potentially do in real estate that are taken from other places. One of the things that we do, and where I want you guys to start going with this, is how could you do this at different points during the real estate transaction? So, what could you do during buyer showings that might make you stand out or create a memorable moment for people while you're touring properties with them? And I'll give you an example, and this doesn't come from the book, but what if we know that a lot of people ask us to take our shoes off or put booties on when we go into a house? What if you had branded socks made and you bring them with you for every single showing you have so that if people have to take their shoes off in the summertime and they don't want to walk around barefoot because it's cold, you can give them branded socks and they're a bright color that's, matches your brand, but also is memorable. And every single time they wear those socks in the future, they're going to think of you. It also is just a really cool branding opportunity for you if they ever get left in the shoebox at the place for the next person who comes in. What about doing it for a listing appointment? So one of the things that we do, by raise of hands, anybody in here actually send pre-listing packets out or do something that they send to the house before they go on a listing appointment? Herb says yes. I'll assume there's a couple other people whose cameras aren't on that they do it too. What we do is we have a branded box with our team name on it. It's black. As you open up the box, you flip it open. It's got beautiful pink tissue paper inside of it and a couple things in there. One of them, every single property we've ever sold, literally just listed one after another after another. It's like 40 pages long. That's in there as just a proof of track record that we have. A preparing your house to sell, which is our sort of our listing magazine that we have for folks on what the process is going to look like. But then the most memorable thing is we have a refrigerated, that's why we have to be careful what time of the year we do it, but we have a refrigerated container of actual cookie dough. And on the bottom of the box, it says, make sure to ask us about the cookie dough before we leave. The goal of this is two things. One, when I show up, now they've got information about me. They've been able to do research, and I didn't force them to go to the internet and take their own time to do it. I put it directly in front of them. I'm also making sure that I'm the first person in the door. So even if that person calls me and we're scheduling the appointment for a week and a half out, if they're meeting with other real estate agents that I don't know about before I have the chance to meet with them, I can guarantee that my box gets there before they meet with anybody else because my system is that as soon as I take that phone call and I have a listing appointment scheduled, it triggers a bunch of systems on the back end of my software that my staff knows that that box has to be delivered within 24 hours of me having this phone call. So it shows up at the house within 24 hours of me finishing this phone call, and I might not see that person for another couple of weeks, but that's there, and they have an impression of me as the first person through the door. The second thing is when I get to go to that listing presentation and they ask me about the cookie dough, I get to explain to them like you guys are all thinking, which is I want you to bake those cookies before the first open house so that the house actually smells like cookies. So it's a completely a breaking of the script, and it's an opportunity to really blow their minds and make sure that you're getting in the door with value before they end up meeting with somebody else. What's something that you could do for post-closing? So a lot of us send text messages or emails or post something on social media about the person's house anniversary a year after the closing. What if you instead were to actually go and shoot a video of yourself with the house in the background, sort of like out and around the corner, just down the block a little bit, and sharing with them some of what your favorite things about when you had bought that house last year in the process of working with them? Hey, do you remember when we did this, this, or this? And making that video with the house in the background and sending that to them as a text message on the day of their house anniversary. Probably make them much more impactful than just the generic happy house anniversary or happy 1 year anniversary of the card. And it would spawn a conversation that would cause that person to call you, which in the end is all we're looking for, right? Not having to cold call, getting the people to call you back. So hopefully that has given you guys a little bit of a better idea as to start getting creative and how can you implement this into your business. The problem is that most of us immediately go to, okay, what would I really like to do? How can I be creative? And what would be a really cool experience that I think is cool? The problem is you're missing the mark on that because you're not necessarily your ideal customer. So we've heard the word avatar, right? Which is sort of a techie word for who's the ideal person you want to do business with. So we have a whole workshop, and I'm happy to share our playbook on this too, if you afterwards, Colby and Ava. How do you actually determine who is the ideal customer that you want to do business with? So there's another book called The Pumpkin Plan. Anybody in here ever read it?
No.
That's a little bit more of an obscure one. My photographer for our real estate photography actually turned me on to it. So give me a minute here. I'll explain the idea behind it. Anybody ever been to one of those fall festivals where they have like giant pumpkins and they're like, okay, who's going to win the award at the end of the summer or the beginning of the fall for the biggest pumpkin? If you were to try to grow one of those pumpkins, you can't just go grab pumpkin seeds, throw them in your yard and hope that you're going to grow like a magically large pumpkin. You have to try to get seeds from historically large pumpkins to begin with. So you're starting with good seeds. And then from there, you got to plant them, you have to tend to them, you have to water, they have to get sun. But if you just let every single one of those pumpkin vines grow, you're going to get some that are really bad and some that are fairly decent. What you have to do is you have to basically plant them, water them, sunlight them. And then as they start to grow, you have to figure out which ones aren't taking so well. And you have to kill off those vines so that you can direct the nutrients in the ground to the vines that actually are growing. And then as those vines continue to grow, you look at the actual pumpkins that are along those vines and say, okay, these are actually good pumpkins, and the little ones that are runty aren't necessarily turning out so well. I have to snip those off so that I'm directing all the nutrients back into the good pumpkins so they have a chance to grow even bigger and bigger. If you take that mentality the way we run a business, the same thing is true, which is I don't want to necessarily be everything to everyone, which is what we as real estate agents, I think, suffer from is I'll sell every house, I'll help every buyer. Just give me the business. I'm hungry. Give me everything. But if you market yourself in that way, you market yourself to nobody. There's a reason why people who have niches crush it in those niches, right? Somebody who crushes divorce couples because they have relationships with all the divorce attorneys or trust and estates. If you narrow what you do and you have a value proposition that's specifically great for that niche, you can crush it in that niche. But if you try to go after everybody, we are out here every day trying to fish with the wrong bait, trying to catch the wrong type of fish. So, how do you take the pumpkin plan and approach this or try to apply that to our business? Well, first thing you should do is think about, and this doesn't work if you're a brand new agent in the business. So I apologize. Most of these are for people who've closed business in the last couple of years and they're in the business for a year or two. If you have at least one customer that you love, and when I say love, I mean like if you had no other customers and you could just take this person and clone them 100 times, that you'd be thrilled to wake up every single morning and do business because it'd be like doing business for fun, not for money. Then that's the person you focus on. Take that person out for lunch, take them out for breakfast, go grab coffee with them, and ask them some really vulnerable questions. Hopefully, this is somebody you did business with, but even if not, you can ask them the same questions. What is it about your last real estate transaction that absolutely sucked? Hopefully it wasn't you. And they can just tell you it's not necessarily that I was working with you. It was like, I hated that the fact that every time I went to go tour a property, I had my kids with me and it was distracting because I couldn't pay attention to the house and I had my husband there and I was really distracted. And that's why we thought we loved the house, but then we got to attorney review and we realized we hated it. Or I had to go back and see it 2 or 3 times because I just couldn't remember because we saw too many properties and my kids were distracting me. I'll get to that point in a second why I gave you that specific reference, but ask them what was really terrible about the process and ask them what was really great about the process too. After a half an hour of sitting down and talking to them about their last real estate transaction, You're going to have a really, really good idea on something that was terrible about the transaction that you can find a solution for. And then you can go create a solution and then bring it back to them, right? So you sit down, they tell you, I hated the fact that every time I toured the property, I had little kids with me and I couldn't pay attention. Cool. So I sit back and I go, okay, what if I were to bring a licensed CPR certified babysitter with me to anybody that I know that had kids that like underage, like anybody under the age of 5 with them. And what I would do is I would bring them along for our buyer tour. And I'd make sure that they entertain the kids while the parents are inside looking at the property so that they can be 100% dedicated and focused and they're paid for out of my pocket. And at the end of the day, they go back and they can have a conversation with a family. So as I think about the solution, I bring it back to that customer and go, hey, I really paid attention to what you asked me that day and told me was a frustration point for you in the business. This is an idea that I have. If I did this and this was to be in place for you when you had bought that house, would this have been of value to you? Yeah, but you know what? That's actually really great. What if you did this and this instead? And now they're helping you craft that solution. You then take that, you go back, you create that solution, you implement it, and then you show that customer who gave you the original idea that you're putting this into practice. And guess who all of a sudden they refer? More people like them, which is how you clone the ideal customer and you start replicating doing business with that same person who happens to have the same problem as the first person because they're friends with them and they're in the same life stage as that person. That's how you create a solution to a problem for the ideal customer that you can then go replicate. But in order to do that, you need to know who your ideal customer is. So, one of the things we do with our business is we sit down once a year and we do an avatar workshop, which is who are our avatars or one avatar that we ideally want to do business with. So, we have three. And one of them is a millennial buyer that's moving from Hoboken or Jersey City or Manhattan to move down to our area. Another one is the move up buyer, which is the person who's already got their first house in maybe Rumson or Fairhaven, and they've made more money now. They've got two working professionals in the family, and they are looking to move up to their dream house, and they have to sell a house. And there's a whole different set of problems for that person compared to the person who's buying the house for the first time that's never bought anything and doesn't have anything that they need to sell in order to move on. And then the third avatar for us is a downsizing seller. It's somebody who's probably over the age of 65 and they haven't bought or sold a house in many, many years. And they're looking to either downsize to an adult community here in New Jersey or they're going to leave and go to Florida or North Carolina. That's not enough information. You need to be able to answer the questions of what's their name? And when I say what's their name, I mean legitimately put a name to this person. What's a name that's very common amongst that group of people from that time frame so that you can see this person on your wall every time you're thinking about running marketing and going, okay, I'm doing this because I'm doing this for Esther. And Esther is the person who's my downsized seller that I'm really trying to market to. What would Esther want? Where does she shop? Where does she go on vacation? What type of food does she eat? What books does she read? What is a phrase from her generation that defines their generation, right? So the millennial generation might be YOLO or whatever phrase you're going to pick, and you're going to use that in the marketing to those folks. It's going to be very different if you use the baby boomer generation that might have a totally different idea and a phrase that they operate from. And then how does that person how can you market to that person? Where does that person exist for you to reach them? The way you're going to reach the millennial buyer might be Instagram, might be Facebook, might be TikTok. You're not reaching as many as people are in there that are seniors are actually on social media right now. That's not the way that they're actually picking who they want to do business with. You're much more likely to be able to do business with somebody who's a downsizing senior citizen if you meet that person face to face. They're much more likely to be at your town community fairs. They're much more likely to be at your public library. They're much more likely to open a physical piece of mail and actually read it than somebody who's 25 years old. So we have a workshop and something I'll share with you guys afterwards. It's like, what are the 25 questions I need to answer in order to know who my ideal customer is that then I can then go create a solution that solves the problem for those folks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I just, if I could chime in here, something that really strikes me about what you're sharing is that all of these ideas that you're able to come up with by crafting this avatar are so unique. It's such like a unique way to provide hospitality, yet it is so systematizable. Like you can actually duplicate it in a way that it still is thoughtful,
Yeah.
even if it's systematized.
I think you have to systemize it. That's the big thing is if you can't systemize it, then unfortunately you're never going to do it, right? And you also can't do it one off for everybody because it's exhausting. We are in the midst of trying to figure out a way to systemize the one offs. So We have our CRM, we use Follow Up Boss, and what we're asking the agents to do is as they're going through the process with the customer, we have a custom field and we're asking them to fill information in that custom field that's very, very specific to that customer. And then we operate happy hours every month at a different restaurant or bar around the county. We've decided instead of doing 12 of those a year, we're going to do six. So we do one every other month. And in the budget we've allocated from those six we're not doing, we're putting that money directly behind unreasonable hospitality reach outs for people in our database. So like I did my, we call it do the database twice at Keller Williams. So like you're making phone calls to your entire sphere of influence over the course of a year twice. I had phone calls 2 weeks ago and I found out that one of my past clients is retiring. We are going to send a gift specifically as a congratulations of him retiring. That's a one-off situational experience based upon the information we gathered. And the budget for that comes from something we were already using for something else. So the systemization of it is really important. Otherwise, you can't necessarily pull it off because it takes you off task from a current cluster customer that you're working with. But you also have to find a way to make it unique enough. In the book, they talk about from Unreasonable Hospitality that um, they have these cards. They found certain things that came up over and over again when customers were in the business. So like people would flip over their plate and they were trying to like read who made the porcelain that they were using and a whole bunch of other things that happened with typical things that guests would ask while they were there. And they found these group of questions were easier if they had these note cards made up inside the reservationist's office. And whenever somebody would see the guest turn over the plate, they would bring this card over that would have where the porcelain was made, how they could find it, who was the artist who made it. So they had all these common things that would recurringly happen throughout the restaurant that they were able to then just go wow the person without even having to bring it to their attention that they heard it or have a conversation about it. So you can systemize those parts of the business too and think about how you can do that from a real estate perspective versus just the restaurant. My favorite story from the book, and I think what helps us sort of figure out how to blow people's minds from a real estate perspective is when you make a reservation for a restaurant, the experience is very predictable, right? You show up at the restaurant, you open the door, you walk in, there's a person, usually a young lady dressed nicely, who's standing behind a podium. And you walk in and you go, I have a reservation at 7 o'clock for four people. Sure. What's the last name? Ten Hoeve. And she never looks at you, right? In a good restaurant, maybe she does, but she's basically sitting there on her iPad or her computer and she's like, okay, take them to table 22. And it's a very impersonal experience, right? 11 Madison Park took that and completely flipped it on its head. And what they did was when you call in for a reservation, the reservationist is not a dedicated person. It's actually your maitre d'. It's the person who's going to be working the night that you're actually coming into the hotel. And just think about the systemization that requires that type of planning for the restaurant to make sure that that day that you're working, the person who took your phone call is actually the one who's going to greet you. They got rid of the podium. And when you walk in the front door, you are greeted by name by the person who took your phone call that day when you made the reservation that says, hi, Mr. Ten Hoeve. I'm so happy you're spending your anniversary with us. Please, I'll show you to your table. Just saying that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up because it's an entirely different experience from walking in and having that non-personal interaction with the person behind the podium. The way they pull that off is the phone call. They gather information on it to make sure they know what the special occasion is that you're there for. But then the maitre d' in the time before the restaurant opens on the day of your reservation is Googling every single person who has a reservation for that night. And they're finding your Facebook picture, your Instagram picture, or something on Google so they know what you look like so that they can greet you by face when you're outside the restaurant before you've even walked in. Are in the midst of trying to apply this to our buyer consultations, which we require to do in office, not in Panera, not in Dunkin' Donuts. And what we do is we're going to have a special space in the parking lot that is dedicated to just our customer. It'll be roped off with the red velvet ropes and it'll have their name right on the spot that we'll prepare for them before they show up. They'll park there as they come into the office. The person working the front desk will know that they're coming and say, it's a pleasure to meet you. We have your room waiting for you. There'll be a TV screen up behind them that says, welcome to the Ten Hoeve family, so that they're greeted and we know that they're showing up for the day. And then once they're in that room, we'll already have their favorite beverage for them waiting in the conference room before we come in to meet with them. Because when we send out the forms or the checklist of information that we want to get for the customer before we do the buyer consultation, it asks a whole bunch of those questions. What's your favorite quote? What's your favorite drink? What's your favorite snack? What's your favorite color? And it just seems like a way to gather information and learn a little bit about people, but then you get to deliver an unreasonable hospitality moment on that the first time they're coming to meet you. Imagine that experience for that customer coming in for the buyer consultation versus the agent they went to go tour a property with that just basically slid this paper in front of them and said, hey, this is a touring agreement. Don't worry, you don't have to pay me anything. We'll figure that out when we get to it. It's a very different consultancy type of experience for that person who's going to want to work with you because you're a professional and you're hearing and seeing that person in a different way than anybody else has paid attention to them.
DJ, if I could just jump in here for a second, because we mentioned to you earlier that our team was reading the book as a team. And at one of our meetings, we actually said, okay, buyers agents, find out some specific information about your buyers so that we can, kind of wow them. But we didn't put a lot of structure around it. And I think it's been challenging for our buyers agents to figure out how to do that. And, maybe even, they forget about it. I'm not sure. How are you training? I'm guessing it's your whole team that's wrapped around this philosophy. How are you training your team to do these things, or is that a later question?
No, it's a great question, and it's something we're struggling with at the same time. I think all of us struggle with this, right? If you're an agent in the field, you're running so fast, it's so easy to forget this information. And we have a policy that I assume a lot of teams have, which is if it doesn't exist in the CRM, it doesn't exist. If you didn't do it in Follow Up Boss, it didn't happen. If you didn't make that phone call and record it in Follow Up Boss, it didn't happen. So we are training our entire team that it has to happen in the CRM. Otherwise, from how many conversations do you need to have a day? How many appointments do you need to have a week? All that stuff from an accountability perspective for our standards, it has to be in there. So if you're doing that and you're recording the notes from that conversation immediately after it happens, it's a chance for you to data dump and just get it out of the way. Just get it in there. And then from there, we have other staff members who can go through and read those notes that then allow them to pull out the little pieces that might be really helpful. But that is a really big challenge because we move so fast. And if you're taking calls while you're on the road, it becomes easy to forget that stuff. And then when you stop driving, are you actually going to stop and put the stuff into your CRM? It's just something that has to become part of your ethos for the team that everybody just, you have to live in here. And once they see it work for somebody else, it becomes proof of concept, right? So if somebody else did that and then you delivered an experience on that that turned that customer into a lifelong customer for you, all of a sudden everybody else in the business goes, okay, I need to do this now because my team's willing to invest in doing this for me. I can just put some information in here and they can deliver on that part.
Love that. There's actually a question in here. Cole, it's from
Yeah,
Randy.
yeah. It's a
You can
great
ask.
question from Randy asking, is there, what's the cost tipping point for implementing these ideas as, they're time consuming and probably costly?
It really becomes dependent on your own tolerance, right? Like I said in the beginning, luxury is about monetary value. Hospitality is about caring for people. So it doesn't really matter how expensive it is. And if you're leaning towards the more expensive option, you're probably trying to fix something with the wrong solution. It's not about spending more money. It's about doing something that's more thoughtful for them. I would say for us, the maximum we spent on something, maybe $100. They're very rarely that expensive. They're usually somewhere in like the $30 to $50 range. So for example, I had a client who was supposed to meet me to tour a property in Rumson last year, and I completely forgot. I took the appointment while I was on the road and didn't put it in my calendar and didn't ask my assistant to do it. And then the next day they called me. They were standing out in front of the house and I'd completely blanked. You guys have been there. You know that feeling when like your stomach goes up into your throat and you're like, "Oh my God, how did I forget to do this?" And we ended up taking that moment and turning it into a really positive. I apologized and owned up to the fact that I had not scheduled it and I had wasted their time. But that afternoon, a Porsche collector's edition book from Amazon showed up at their door with a custom blanket, not a custom block, but a team monogram blanket that we had with some other Porsche accessories because we knew that the people were Porsche enthusiasts and they had a couple different Porsche cars. And it became something as like an apology note. I'm super sorry, but hopefully you'll find another opportunity for us to work with or for you to work with us. It took something that was a negative and turned it into a positive that was specific to the customer. But from a monetary perspective, usually not that expensive.
That's great as well. Mark Benson is in the group and he has his hand up. So hi,
Go
Mark.
for it, Mark.
Hi, DJ. I have a question for you is with regard to your support staff and showings
Wait,
with.
I know this, Mark.
Yes,
In
you
case you're
do.
wondering about unreasonable hospitality, before I even let you get your question out, Mark lives this and breathes this. I've never seen someone so dedicated to trying to find me business in New Jersey who doesn't live in New Jersey and has never done business with me. Mark, I'm always impressed that you're on that much of an alert for people giving referrals out and you have memories or somehow a system of being able to send the person who lives in that area back to wherever that referral is coming from. So thank you. I always appreciate you.
Always happy to help any way I can. So my question is, when working with ultra high net worth individuals or high net worth individuals, and you're showing buyers, do you have anybody who's accompanying you? Do you have showing assistants that are at the house before you arrive and stay afterwards to collect any information? Or I'm assuming that all of them are listing agent accompany, but I'm wondering, do you have sort of the right-hand person either ahead of you or behind you?
We actually haven't implemented that. We find it really important to just build that personal relationship with the customer themselves. So again, very, very, very rarely would we be touring somebody through a property that we hadn't had a consultation with in person with already.
No, I think I may have miscommunicated. I'm talking about somebody that is like taking the notes, following up, that sort of thing for you, so that you can stay focused with the client.
And you're asking that question as if I'm the agent representing the buyer, touring the buyer
Yes,
through it, or as if I'm the listing
yes.
agent. Okay.
No, no, no.
Either way, we don't. We don't actually have anybody else touring that. That's probably a pretty interesting way we could probably implement it, but to yet we haven't done that. We usually just rely on the agent, whether they're representing whether they're representing the listing and they're collecting information about the buyer, or if you represent the buyer, we just rely on that person to collect that information. But that'd be very interesting to attempt and to try. Have you
Thanks.
tried that before?
No, but it's a concept that I gave some thought to, and I thought, well, you'd be the person to ask.
Well, you give me something new to try, that's for sure. I have
You know, it's like the person who has the water ready for them at the next stop, or they greets them, you know, has whatever their favorite snack is or whatever it is. It's right there as they get out of the car.
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I mean, me personally, I tend to go really grand with my ideas. So if those of you guys who don't know my business, I'm in business with my wife. My wife is by far my better half. I'm the ideator. She's the one who puts things into practice, and it works really well for us because if we just did things the way she did, we'd never ever go outside the box. And if you followed me, we would all just jump off the cliff without having a parachute. So the two things work really well together. But I want to create a van. I want like a completely outfitted four-seater Sprinter van with TVs and luxury seats and a refrigerator in it, so that when we pick people up, we use that to go actually do our buyer tours. And there's a private driver that's driving us around. I would love nothing more than to be able to do that for all of our buyers who are high net worth and deliver that type of an experience. And I think you probably could have an assistant that's with you for that to make sense. Even if you didn't, you'd be able to focus on delivering the customer service perspective because you're not worried about driving the customer around or having them follow you from house to house. Hope that helps and makes sense.
Hey, just to throw this in there, Mark, we're not doing exactly what you're asking, but recently my ops manager, who's on the call here with us, Margaret, has attended several listing appointments with me for that very reason. I'm not a great note taker, and I want to be able to focus, precisely on the conversation that I'm having with the seller. And it's worked out really nicely because she can stay behind and kind of do a once over on the property or go ahead of time. And for so far we've arrived at the same time, but it's given her the opportunity to have a one-on-one relationship with that seller as well. So not only does it free up me to give 100% of my attention, but it also introduces her right off the bat to my client. It's really worked nicely.
You know, I'm just thinking of the hot dog experience, and if you had somebody that was listening, and then they showed up at the end of the buyer tour, and they had the ice cream or whatever it was that they liked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty wild experience that in the middle of the tour, they duck out and they find something that they referenced earlier in the tour that would be pretty phenomenal. That'd be a very strong way to end that appointment, right?
That would be impressive.
That's a really
Can
cool
I
idea.
just mention, I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry, I don't know how to put the hand up thing. Sorry, guys.
Me either, Sharon.
Thank God it's not just me, Eva. I was like, anyway, see, I need my own assistant for all that kind of stuff. But I think that is a great idea, and having someone else so that you're 100% present. I think everything you're saying, DJ, is awesome. I think it's about, being in a great mind space yourself so that you can truly be present for your clients. who ends up becoming your friend and, part of the family. Because I don't know, that seems to be what happens in my case, because it's all about the details. I was in a thrift store the other day. I'm doing a renovation for a client of mine, and he loves horses. So I picked up a $15 leather horse, had that in the house when I was showing him, some work that was going on. And I just knew he was so touched,
Right.
because it is the little things, you know.
I
So
think
love all that. But
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go for it.
yeah, because I'll forget it otherwise. What I was going to say is I use Otter AI, and
Yep.
that just records
Yeah, you're
because
not
I'm on.
back
Sorry.
Mona,
in
you're
the
off
boom.
mute.
You're good, Sharon.
Oh, sorry. I just find the Otter AI great for note taking for long conversations, and then can just summarize and be like, oh, here's the points you need to follow
By
up
the way,
on.
if you guys don't know what Sharon's talking about, you see all these people in here that are like Firefly AI, that are these note takers that are coming into Zoom to take your notes for you. It's the same thing. It's
Mm,
an app on your phone that basically will listen to everything you're doing and it'll take notes and then it gives you a synopsis. So if you want somebody to take notes on your conversation that you want to put in your follow-up boss or whatever your CRM is, you just use an app like that. It's a great way to do it. Sharon, that's a great
I was
idea.
going to ask you as well. I don't know if you saw earlier, but what software are you guys using that sets up the whole thing with the cookie dough? Because when you were saying the thing about the cookie dough, I was like, can I send my kids in to bake cookies in your house so that there's the smell of it, if they don't want to do it?
So for us, it's really it's still very rudimentary, right? So if I put a appointment in the calendar, my assistant sees all my appointments, and she gets a notification as soon as they get set up. She sees that, she knows what she has to do, and she has the box in the office. She puts the whole thing together, and if she can't drive it, they're on her way home in the day. We have a list of 5 people in the brokerage who are sort of new agents that don't really have enough business yet, that they've agreed for 25 bucks, they'll drive it wherever we need to leave it for them.
Awesome. That's so cheap.
It's really cheap. Generally, we're not driving them too far. The other part of it is too, we leave it at the front door, and a lot of people don't enter through their front door. So we found that in the summertime, we were leaving this refrigerated cookie dough out, and people weren't necessarily
Mm,
remembering to go to their front door. So we actually have them take a picture of it, and then they send it to us. My assistant will then send a text to the person saying, "Hey, we left you a gift at your front door," so they know at least to go and check there, so it's not sitting outside for 3 days.
yeah, it's all in the details.
It's in the
It
process,
is the
right?
minutia. Mm,
Yeah, in the operations is really where the magic comes out.
hmm.
So the other book I mentioned to you guys in the beginning, The Power of Moments, it really takes these experiences and these opportunities and puts them into 3 different buckets. They're called peaks, milestones, and pits. And that's really a good explanation of all the business we do, right? It falls into one of those 3 different categories. A peak moment might be you got your offer accepted. A milestone might be you got finished with the inspections. And then a pit might be deal falls apart after the inspections because agreement on the details, or house doesn't appraise, or you get beat out with another offer during attorney review. As you guys are starting to think about where you want to implement what you're learning today, you should start with the pits. If you can fill those gaps first, that gives you a solid foundation to operate from. You don't really need to focus on creating more wow moments if there's still parts during your experience of working with a customer that are really lows that you can't fill that void. So what I would suggest you do is think about some of the low points that happen during the course of a transaction and ideate around those to make those magical. And then from there, you can take the milestones and the peak moments and actually elevate those even higher. We haven't figured some of those out yet, so I'm in the same phase of you guys as to, okay, how do I take when there's a shortfall in the appraisal and turn that into a positive moment that's really something that's either funny or cute or changes their mind without actually being insulting. So we've got some work to do there as well, but it gives you the sort of the framework that I want to share with you as you think about how do you take what you're learning today and implement this. And what I would suggest you do, and this is in one of the workbooks I have that I can share with you guys as well, is sit down and figure out maybe 7 or 10 different moments during the course of a real estate transaction. What are those key moments? What are the things that just milestones that happen during the course of the transaction? In the next column, what is the typical real estate behavior that happens as a result of that? Appraisal comes back, it's at value. You tell the homeowner, hey, by the way, your appraisal came back, congratulations. Or maybe it came back over the purchase price and you're like, hey, you're sitting on $25,000 of equity on day one. Great news. That's more than a lot of people are doing, but is it really momentous enough for somebody to feel like they've been heard or seen? Probably not. You could probably take that another level higher. So you look at it and you go, what's the key moment? What's the typical behavior? And then what's the unreasonable hospitality solution I can create around that problem or around that peak, pit, or milestone. That'll give you a place to start from. And then from there, you can start coming up with really crazy different ideas and figuring out where you want to implement them.
I
So
see, sorry, DJ, I see that Mark has his hand up. I don't know if that's still or again. Mark, are you looking to ask a question?
It's again, I just wanted to chime in with
Perfect.
something else that
We want again.
I'm wondering if any of you have heard of Mark Satterfield. He's not real estate specific, although he does talk about real estate. He's has a series called The Velvet Rope Playbook, and he has a website, getwealthyclients.com. The reason I bring him up is he does about a 7-minute video just about every night. And he had one last week that's called They Don't Need Another Friend, They Need a Trusted Expert. And he goes into explaining that most of the ultra high net worth individuals have plenty of friends. They're not looking to you to be their friend that may develop if they choose, but they're really looking for a trusted expert. So if you're interested in watching his videos, you can watch them on YouTube. There's no charge, and you can get a lot of education and training through that.
thanks, Mark. I'm going to
That's
definitely
great,
check
Mark.
that out. Velvet Rope, is that what it's called?
No, it's called getwealthyclients.com. That's his website. And but the videos on YouTube are the Velvet Rope Playbook.
Mark, you want to put your YouTube channel right in there too? So, because you said that we could see it on yours, right?
And not on mine, but I can try and post the link.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
That's awesome.
misunderstood. Hey, while DJ is still talking about implementation, I encourage anybody in here who has good ideas that you're using, throw them in the chat, and we can wrap with those ideas when DJ's wrapping up.
Yeah, so the workshop and really the playbook I have works best when you get a bunch of people together because you can sit there and go, okay, let's figure out all these key moments. Let's figure out what we think the normal behaviors would be. And then let's pick one that we're going to all kind of work around at the same time to try to brainstorm around a solution. You have the playbook. You can do this afterwards if you want to do it alone, if you want to do it with your team. So that would definitely help. We could do that while we were on here, but I don't want to take everybody's time to necessarily do that. I'll go back if it's okay at this point and answer the question. I forget who asked it earlier about how I had broken into the luxury real estate market. So I have, I think as most people do in real estate, sort of a wacky story on how I ended up in real estate. So I worked for Pfizer, which is a pharmaceutical sales company. In my second job out of college, I worked in another job for maybe a year and a half, and then I got a job working for them as a sales rep. And I did that job from 2003 till 2016. Now, I got my real estate license in 2008. So for 8 years between 2008 and 2016, I was doing two careers at the same time. I was full-time for Pfizer and I was trying to build a real estate business at the same time. I had the luxury of being able to moonlight as a real estate agent and still have a consistent salary that came in with benefits, which made it really hard because most of us don't live within our means. And as you start to earn a second income, you start elevating your means, and it makes it even harder to leave the thing you were trying to get rid of in the first place. So it took me a little longer than I had wanted, but I was able to leave in 2016 and fully dive into real estate when my wife had actually already left her job working in medical sales as well. But my training when I worked for Pfizer was probably the biggest asset that I had, which was top 10 training program anywhere in any industry in the world. So I learned how to speak to people, and it's what we use to actually make sure that our brand new agents on our team who've never sold a house before can go out and work with luxury clients. So we use something called the challenge. I used to call it the pressure test, but people got so scared I had to change the name of it. But as a team owner and somebody who was servicing multi-million dollar clients, and I'll get back to how I started working with them, I had to have a comfort level around handing somebody who's a $2 million buyer to an agent who's been in the business for 6 or 7 months, which is not the easiest thing to do. I don't want the customer to be unhappy. I don't want the agent to fall flat on their face. And I don't want the lead that I'm creating or paying for or a past client of mine to disappear and go work with somebody else. So as part of our 12-week training program, at week 8, we created something called the challenge. And from week 1 to week 8, you learn all the nuts and bolts from handling inbound phone calls to running real estate searches to following up with the client, showing houses, how inspections work, appraisals, all that stuff. The last 4 weeks after the challenge are more about specialty systems like septics and wells and radon and all that stuff. But at week 8, you should be sufficient enough to be able to find your way through from an initial phone call with a client to being able to write and get an offer accepted. So what we do is once they've gotten through the first 7 weeks of training, we let them know that they're ready to qualify to do the challenge as long as they feel comfortable. And at sometime in the following week, they're going to get a phone call from someone in our business, whether it's me or my wife, who's our CFO, or our director of ops. And we're not going to be DJ, Nikki, or Max. We're going to be Joe Smith calling from Milwaukee that's relocating here with a company and is looking to buy a house in Little Silver, New Jersey. They have to take that phone call as it comes in randomly and handle that person from an inbound lead phone call all the way through to a successfully accepted offer, with us acting as the buyer every single step along the way. They literally have to take the phone call. They have to send out their contact card when they're done. They have to enter the person into follow-up boss. They have to send out the initial buyer email, schedule the buyer consultation, whether virtually or in person, give the buyer consultation, get me to sign a CIS and a buyer broker agreement form, schedule showings, go show me 3 houses, close me on making an offer for one of them, go back, write it up, present the offer to the person who's actually the buyer, who's functioning as a listing agent at this point, actually send them the DocuSign, negotiate the offer, and get back to an agreement with the final wrapped up package that they send to their customer as the listing agent, which would be in our state what we do for attorney review. I know that if you can finish that, I can put you out there and give you leads to go work with a new customer, because you know enough that the customer's not going to know if you screw up. Because if you pass it with us where we know everything you're going to do wrong, the customer doesn't know 80% of that stuff. They're just going to be happy that you're paying attention to them. But it gives our agent the comfort level to know that if they can pass this with us, they're going to be okay out there with the client. So that's one of the things we do as a team to systemize the training to make sure our agents are technically sound enough to go work with high net worth individuals. They don't qualify to get leads from us or work any handoffs from me and my clientele until they're actually until they finish that challenge. And you can fail it. Plenty of people do. I've only had one person quit as part of it. I've had plenty of people who failed it the first time, and we went back and retrained on 2 or 3 sections of it, took it again and did perfectly fine from there and moved on. The one person who failed, you guys will like this story. So he was a young gentleman, just recently out of college. And when I called him for that initial phone call, and I was Joe Smith from Milwaukee looking to move here, he answered the phone. And he's like, "Hey, DJ." And I was like, "No, I'm sorry. This isn't DJ. This is Joe Smith." And he goes, "No, DJ, I know it's you. I got to take my dog outside to go to the bathroom. I'll call you back in 3 minutes. Okay." Okay. Hung the phone up, took the dog out to go to the bathroom. He called me back and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready to go, Joe." And I was like, "Nope, it's over." That was the end of the opportunity. You blew it. What is the customer's not going to do that. The customer's not going to wait for you to all of a sudden, I got to take my dog out to go to the bathroom. This is a real environment. They have to operate in that environment as if it was just a customer, and the customer's not going to wait for you to do that. So I think your environment and your community that you create in your team has a lot to do with how they approach the way that they work with their customers as well. To go back to the initial question, which is how did I break into luxury? I was working in medical sales, servicing really high net worth physicians also, because I was in hospital sales. So I was dealing with neuroscientists, I was dealing with electrophysiologists, which are a subset of cardiologists, highly specialized, infectious disease doctors, critical care doctors. So I was dealing with people who had specialty training. They had done residency, and then they had gone and done multiple fellowships. So I had the comfort level that I was able to walk that walk and talk that talk with the customer. I just didn't have the real estate experience. My reason for choosing real estate was my family's business was construction, that my mom and dad operated a company in northern New Jersey in Bergen County for 40 years. So I'd been around construction my whole life. And now that I knew how to sell, how to talk to people from sales, I put those 2 things together in real estate. And then what I started doing when I got into the business was I created these infographics about the one town where I wanted to grow my business, which was the town I lived in, Colts Neck. Colts Neck's a very equestrian town. It's about 15 miles from the beach, but it's horse country. Guy who lives around the corner from me is Bruce Springsteen. And what I did was I have a penchant for creating graphics. So I like visual arts. I would create these infographics that I'd put out every month on social media. And it was the last 10 properties that had sold, highest price to lowest price, what the average price per acre things were selling for, average price per square foot, what the home price had gone up or down and by how much. And it was basically like 8 or 9 different statistics that were put out on this branded, colored infographic that I would share. And it started getting shared all throughout my community to people who had just bought houses with other real estate agents that were sharing it with their friends who were looking to move here, because it was all the data that the buyers wanted that wasn't easy for them to find. You got to remember, this is like 2009, 2010. So it was like very early in Zillow's existence. So although that information's out there easier for people to find now, at the time it really wasn't. And it was a branded way for the people to then give an introduction who might have just worked with another real estate agent, but they passed along that infographic and then they had the referral come to me that I was helping that person buy their next house. The easiest explanation is try one opportunity. You need to get one luxury person to work with, and you need to crush it for that person. And then you just need to tell the world about what you did for that person, and that will grow via word of mouth. One thing I did to grow my luxury clientele was, this is sort of something else we teach our agents, which is everybody hates cold calling, but you still need to network, whether you like cold calling or not. So what if you turned your networking and your lead generation into something you actually enjoy? Figure it out who it is that's in your universe, people that you have a relationship with, that is somebody you like being around for hobby or personal time reasons, that's also connected to your ideal avatar, right? So for me, I wanted to grow my business in the $5 million plus waterfront environment. So I also like clothes. Usually I'm dressed like suited to the nines, and today I'm not. I decided that since I already went to this local tailor and I spent a lot of my money there, I know that that tailor is somebody I like, and I know that all the wealthy guys in the peninsula area of Monmouth County are already likely customers of his, and they like connecting their clients with other people. I'm going to make it purposeful that every Friday for the entire year, I'm going to go spend an hour at the tailor shop. And they create an environment at the tailor shop that they like you just coming and hanging out. It becomes a place to sort of escape the world and to come and just, socialize. So I made it a point to spend an hour to an hour and a half there every single Friday for about a year. And within a month of doing it, there were enough clients that had come in that they connected me with, that I had one guy who moved me from like an average $2 to $3 million price range, which is like the highest thing I'd ever done. The guy bought a $5.5 million house with me. He then referred me to his brother, who bought a $4.5 million house, then sold their house with me. And then I ended up selling 4 more houses along the Navasink River that I now have records for the last 3 years in a row, that all came from that intentional purpose of spending time with my tailor. So you might be an equestrian, go spend more time at the stable. You might love wine, go spend more time at wine tastings. Whatever it is that you love doing, go find the place where your ideal customer is connected to the hobby that you like, and go do more of it.
That's great advice. We are over time because this was just so value packed that I barely even realized we were running over time. So thank you all for staying. Like literally everyone stayed, even though we hit 3 o'clock, which I think says a lot. I learned a lot from this call. For people who attended, if there's things that you're doing or like ideas that you have that you want to bounce around with us or DJ, like definitely reach out. We'd love to help you develop your client hospitality ideas moving into the future. And DJ, if you're open to having people reach out and connect with you, we can definitely provide your information via email after to
I would
everyone
love
who's
that.
here.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate you taking the time out of the middle of a very busy day with me. So thank you. Hopefully you found value in this. Ava and Colby, thank you guys for giving me the venue for this. And you'll get all my personal information. I would love to get some of the ideas you guys have, because I'm sure there are things that we haven't done. And just because we share ideas doesn't mean that it's competition for you, right? There's plenty of business out there for everybody. The secret sauce is in how you do what you do, not what you do. So I'm an open book. I'll share with you everything we do, and vice versa.
I will say this was time well spent, and appreciate all the ideas, and my head is spinning. So I'm ordering those books. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
this.
In our
Thank
follow-up
you.
email, I will make sure to include the title of all 3 books that DJ mentioned. I can even include the one that Mark mentioned.
Perfect.
And for those of you who did catch Sherry last week, we're bringing her back, like I said, for an encore presentation 1 week from today. And then we have Sean Work closing out Q2 with us on June 23rd. He's going to be talking about how to build referral relationships with your vendor partners, which actually is a really nice segue from the topic that we had today, because you can bring hospitality into agent and vendor relationships as well.
Absolutely.
Are you
Thank
sending
you,
a link
DJ.
email?
Yes, you'll get all the links.
Excellent. Thank you.
Really nice to meet
DJ,
you all.
thank you
Thank you.
so much. Fabulous.
Thank
Really,
you, DJ.
Bye,
really
guys.
My
appreciate it.
pleasure, guys. Have a great
Have a
day.
great week.
Bye.
Thank you, DJ.
You too.